The alien tribunal went silent when the human prisoner smiled at the execution timer, because no one in the chamber understood why a condemned engineer would ask them to increase the countdown instead of stopping it. Above the glass floor of the Hall of Weights, the planet Veyrath turned slowly beneath a veil of copper clouds. It was a courtroom built in orbit, a place where empires judged the weak with polished voices and clean hands. Every wall was a mirror. Every mirror carried the faces of ambassadors, admirals, priests, merchants, warlords, and spectators from 300 worlds. They had gathered to witness the final humiliation of humanity's last diplomatic mission. Captain Elias Ward knelt at the center of the chamber with his wrists locked in magnetic chains. He was not dressed like a hero. His uniform was torn at the shoulder. Dried blood had darkened one side of his collar. There was a burn across his jaw where a stun lash had struck him during capture. His left eye was swollen nearly shut, but the other remained open, steady, and infuriatingly calm. The Vorn Dominion had expected begging. The tribunal had prepared for confession. The galaxy had tuned in for surrender. Instead, Elias looked up at High Arbiter Sorel Voss and said, "Your timer is too short." A ripple moved through the chamber. The High Arbiter's crest lifted, the silver membranes behind his skull spreading like blades. Voss belonged to the Thalori, a species famous for never raising their voices because they had spent 2,000 years making others do it for them. His robes were white, his hands long and spotless, his face narrow and elegant. He looked less like a judge than a sculpture made to frighten kings. "You object to the countdown?" Voss asked. "No," Elias said. "I object to the math." Several alien delegates exchanged glances. On the far wall, the execution timer glowed in red numbers. 4 minutes, 12 seconds. At 0, the tribunal would authorize the Dominion fleet to fire on the human colony of Marrow's Reach, where 87,000 civilians had been placed under orbital siege. The official charge was unlawful occupation of restricted territory. The real crime was simpler. Humans had found something beneath the colony, something the Dominion wanted buried, something the tribunal wanted forgotten. Voss leaned forward on his elevated bench. "You were offered a chance to preserve your settlement by surrendering the Archive Corps. You refused. You were offered exile. You refused. You were offered silence. You refused. Do not insult this chamber by pretending arithmetic is your concern." Elias slowly turned his head toward the mirrored walls. He could not see Marrow's Reach from the tribunal. No one could. The colony was 13 light minutes away, hidden behind a Dominion blockade. But he knew what was happening there. He knew the families were inside storm shelters under the Red Hills. He knew the medical wing had moved the newborns into the old mining tunnels because the surface shields were failing. He knew the farmers had armed themselves with welding cutters and survey drones because there were no soldiers left to stand between them and the sky. And he knew Commander Rhea Ward, his older sister, was still down there. The tribunal thought he was the last negotiator. They did not know he was also bait. Voss gestured, and the magnetic chains tightened until Elias's shoulders jerked. "The timer stands," the arbiter said. "At 0, Marrow's Reach will be cleansed. Its records will be seized. Its survivors, if any remain, will be processed under Dominion authority." Elias looked back at him. "That is why I need more time." The chamber stilled. Voss's eyes narrowed. "For what?" Elias smiled through blood. "For them to realize you're lying." 3 minutes, 38 seconds. No one moved at first. That was the strange thing about fear when it meets certainty. It does not always explode. Sometimes it freezes because the mind needs a moment to decide whether the impossible has entered the room. Then the Dominion commander standing beside the prisoner struck Elias across the mouth. The blow turned his head. Blood hit the glass floor in 3 bright drops. Elias laughed once. That was worse than defiance. Defiance could be punished. Laughter had to be understood. Commander Varkun leaned close. He was enormous even without armor, a Vorn war-cast officer with obsidian skin, tusk ridges along his jaw, and eyes like coals under ash. His chest plates carried marks from 7 conquest campaigns. His gauntlets still smelled faintly of ionized metal from the human escort ship he had destroyed. "You think your colony can survive the Dominion?" Varkun asked. "No," Elias said. That answer caught him off guard. Elias lifted his face again. I think you cannot survive what you did to get there. The High Arbiter made a small motion with 2 fingers. Explain your accusation. Gladly. You will answer directly. I always do. The chains tightened again. Elias sucked in a breath but did not cry out. Voss's voice became colder. You claim deception, present evidence. Elias looked at the timer. 3 minutes, 9 seconds. Not yet. A murmur broke through the tribunal then, hundreds of voices rising across translation fields. Voss silenced them with a pulse of judicial authority that dimmed every mirror in the chamber. You are in no position to control this proceeding, he said. That is where you're wrong, Elias replied. I am the only person in this room who knows what proceeding this is. Varkun's hand moved toward his sidearm. The Arbiter raised a palm. No, let him spend his final words. Elias looked toward the Dominion commander. That is the second mistake, Varkun growled. Second? The first was leaving my sister alive. On Marrow's Reach, 12 kilometers beneath the colony's central ridge, Commander Elias Ward stood in a cavern filled with dead machines and listening ghosts. The archive chamber had not been built by humans. It had waited beneath the planet for at least 9 million years, sealed inside black stone that mining lasers could not cut and survey scanners could not classify. The colonists had found it by accident after a sinkhole swallowed 3 harvest crawlers and revealed a spiral stairway descending into the mountain. Inside, they found no weapons. That had disappointed the first survey team. Then they found the memories. Not recordings, not writing, not even data in the way humans understood data. The walls were made of a mineral lattice that responded to touch, heartbeat, breath, and grief. When Rhea placed her palm against the first panel, she had seen a city burning under a purple sun and children being led into ships by creatures with transparent bones. When Dr. Neve Amari touched another, she saw star maps shifting faster than language. When old Thomas Cade, the colony's watermaster, leaned against the central pillar by accident, he fell to his knees and whispered the same phrase for 10 minutes. They erased themselves to save us. That was when the colony stopped thinking of the chamber as a discovery. It became a grave. Then the Dominion arrived. Rhea stood before the central archive pillar, wearing patched combat armor over a farmer's thermal suit. She had 43 armed volunteers, 6 damaged defense drones, a half-blind medical robot, and 1 civilian encryption specialist who had thrown up twice and refused to leave. On the chamber wall, a projection of the tribunal flickered in broken color. Elias knelt beneath alien judgment. The timer burned above him. Rhea's hands curled into fists. He always talks too much, muttered Thomas Cade beside her. Rhea did not look away from the screen. He talks exactly enough. The encryption specialist, May Hollis, hunched over a console connected to the archive by a nest of fiber lines and alien crystal threads. Her fingers shook as she worked. The Dominion jamming field is rotating, May said. I can punch through for maybe a second, maybe less. Then we give them something worth seeing. We still do not know if the archive will translate properly. Rhea watched Commander Varkun raise his hand to strike her brother again. It does not need to translate perfectly, she said. It just needs to tell the truth. Above them, the colony shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere far overhead, a shield emitter died with a dull tremor through stone. The Dominion had not fired its main batteries yet. They were being careful. They wanted the archive intact. That was the only reason Marrow's Reach still existed. Rhea understood the shape of the trap. If they surrendered the archive, the Dominion would bury what it contained and disappear the witnesses. If they destroyed it, every lie the Dominion had built would remain standing. If they waited, the tribunal would authorize slaughter with a clean record and a legal seal. There had to be a fourth option. Humans were rarely the strongest species in the room. They were not the oldest, fastest, toughest, or most beautiful. Their bodies broke easily in vacuum. their bones shattered under forces that other species considered mild turbulence. They needed sleep too often, water too frequently, and emotional closure with embarrassing regularity. But give humans an impossible choice, and they developed a habit that made older civilizations deeply uncomfortable. They looked for the seam. Rhea turned to the volunteers gathered in the archive chamber. Farmers, mechanics, teachers, miners, parents. The remnants of a colony that had built greenhouses on a planet everyone said was too dry, too unstable, too far from trade lanes to matter. "Once we open the archive," she said, "the Dominion will know. They will come through the mountain. They will try to seize the core. We delay them long enough for the signal to leave." A young man near the entrance swallowed hard. "And after that?" Rhea looked at him. No one in the cavern needed the answer spoken beautifully. "After that," she said, "we keep them from taking it." In the tribunal chamber, the timer reached 2 minutes. High Arbiter Voss studied Elias like a surgeon choosing where to cut. "You were sent to negotiate," Voss said. "Instead, you made threats, refused lawful orders, and concealed material evidence." Elias's lips were split now. "You mean evidence that proves the Dominion sterilized 6 inhabited systems and blamed the dead for rebellion?" The tribunal erupted. This time, not even Voss's authority pulse fully silenced them. The Vorn commander stepped forward. "Lies." Elias turned his head toward the mirrors. "Then let the archive speak." Voss stiffened. It was small, almost invisible, but Elias saw it. So did half the room. The High Arbiter had known the word before Elias said it. There it was, the seam. Elias leaned into the pain of the chains and raised his voice. "Ask him why the Dominion blockade began before the colony filed its discovery report. Ask why tribunal observers were denied access. Ask why every sensor log from the surrounding systems was sealed by emergency order before any human testimony was heard." Varkun struck him again, harder this time. Elias went down on one hand. The timer read 1 minute, 43 seconds. Voss spoke sharply. "Enough!" Elias spat blood onto the glass. "Not nearly." The mirrored walls flickered. For less than a heartbeat, the tribunal feed distorted. Most saw only static. Elias saw the first ghost, a city beneath a purple sun, towers made of pale bone glass, ships rising while fire crossed the horizon, a species with translucent skin turning their faces upward as orbital shadows gathered above them. Then the image vanished. The chamber went dead silent. High Arbiter Voss stood. Commander Varkun's hand closed around his weapon. Elias smiled again, but this time there was sorrow in it. 1 second, he said. That was all she needed. On Marrow's reach, the archive woke. It did not wake like a machine. There was no hum of power, no rising engine note, no flood of clean data across human screens. It woke like a buried ocean remembering the moon. Light spread through the chamber walls in branching veins. Symbols appeared and collapsed into images. Images became memories. Memories became testimony. The air filled with voices speaking a language no living throat had used in millions of years. Yet every person present understood the emotion beneath it. Fear, hope, regret, warning. May Hollis cried out as her console overloaded. "It is too much! Filter it!" Rhea shouted. "I am trying!" The first Dominion assault team reached the outer tunnels 30 seconds later. They came through the mining access with shock shields and thermal lances, expecting frightened civilians with improvised weapons. They found the first corridor empty. That should have worried them. Human minds are not empty because humans abandon them. Human minds are empty because someone has made a decision about where the enemy is allowed to stand. The floor beneath the first Vorn squad collapsed into a slurry pit filled with drilling lubricant and crushed magnetite. Their armor locked down automatically to prevent sinking, which meant they could not move when the old harvest crawlers rolled out from side tunnels and clamped mining jaws around their weapons. The second squad tried the upper bypass and triggered a greenhouse irrigation release. 40,000 liters of mineral water froze instantly in the cold tunnel air, sealing the passage in a wall of dirty ice. The third squad used explosives. That worked for 9 meters. Then they reached Thomas Cade's pressure doors. Thomas had spent 30 years repairing colony water systems with parts that had no right to fit together. He had built those doors from ore hauler plates, landing struts, and stubbornness. When the Dominion cutters touched them, the doors did not open. They screamed, smoked, glowed, and held. Thomas stood behind them with both hands on the manual brace. "How long?" Rhea asked over comms. Thomas glanced at the heat gauge climbing into red. "Long enough to make them feel foolish. That is not a number. It is a human number." Rhea almost smiled. Then the mountain shook again, harder. A defense volunteer fell. Dust turned the air gray. The archive pillar flashed brighter, reacting not to the attack, but to the fear of the people defending it. May shouted, "Signal package forming. I can transmit, but the Dominion net will catch it unless we disguise the carrier." "As what?" May looked up, eyes wide behind cracked lenses. "As a surrender code." Rhea stared at her. May swallowed. "They are waiting for one. Their blockade net is open to authenticated capitulation traffic from the colony governor. If we embed the archive inside a surrender burst, they will receive it first." "Yes. And then?" "If I am right, their own relays will forward it to the tribunal verification lattice before they realize what they are carrying." Rhea looked toward the screen where Elias knelt under the timer. Her brother had asked for more time, not because he needed it, because they did. "Do it," she said. May hesitated. "It will look real." "Good." The surrender code left Marrow's reach 11 seconds before the execution timer reached 0. It traveled upward through cracked antennas, through ash, through Dominion interference fields, through the waiting blockade net. Vorn command systems recognized the format, accepted the packet, stamped it as enemy capitulation, and forwarded it automatically to the tribunal for lawful closure. Then the archive opened inside their network. The execution timer stopped at 1 second. Across the hall of weights, every mirror turned black. Then every mirror showed the dead, not human dead, older dead. Entire worlds erased by the Dominion before the Dominion had a name for empire. Species declared extinct by plague, famine, civil collapse, solar catastrophe, religious suicide, technological failure. One by one, their final records unfolded in the tribunal chamber, preserved beneath Marrow's reach by refugees who had escaped the first Dominion purges and hidden the truth inside a planet no one valued. There were no speeches at first, only images. A mother placing a child into a stasis vessel while the sky burned green. An elder sealing a vault with shaking hands. A fleet of civilian ships trying to flee through a corridor the Dominion had promised was safe. Vorn war vessels waiting at the exit. The chamber watched cities surrender and vanish anyway, watched treaties signed and broken before the ink dried, watched witnesses erased, watched tribunal seals appear on falsified reports, watched high arbiters from past generations accept Dominion evidence without inspection, watched the same legal phrases repeat over centuries, clean enough to hide oceans of blood. The final image was different. It showed Marrow's reach from orbit, the current blockade, the current tribunal, the current timer. The present had joined the archive. For the first time in recorded galactic law, the Hall of Weights became evidence against itself. Elias remained on his knees. High Arbiter Voss did not sit back down. Commander Varkun's face had gone still in the way predators go still before deciding whether to bite or run. The timer blinked. 1 second. Elias looked up at Voss. "Now," he said softly, "you may continue." No one did. The mid-chamber silence broke when one of the minor ambassadors began to weep. She was from the Ilvan Compact, a small aquatic civilization that had joined the tribunal only 40 years earlier. Her translator could not shape the sound properly, so it came through as static and grief. Then another delegate stood. Then another. The Dominion representative tried to cut his feed. The tribunal lattice refused. The archive had embedded itself into every authenticated legal record in the hall, not as malware, not as sabotage, but as testimony. The system could not reject it without rejecting the tribunal's own evidentiary laws. That was the beautiful weakness of rules. If written honestly, they could trap liars too. High Arbiter Voss turned toward Elias slowly. "You knew this would happen." "No, Elias said. "I trusted that it might." "That is not strategy." Elias looked past him to the mirrors, still filled with ancient dead. "It is when humans are out of options." Varkun drew his sidearm. He moved faster than the guards, faster than the chamber drones, faster than Elias could rise, but not faster than Ambassador Saru of the Keth Accord, who stepped between the weapon and the prisoner with all four arms spread wide. The shot hit Saru in the chest. The ambassador fell without a sound. For one impossible moment, no one understood what had happened. A Dominion commander had fired inside the Hall of Weights, not on a soldier, not on an enemy, on a seated ambassador of a neutral accord in full public record under judicial seal. The galaxy saw it. Varkun realized that a breath too late. The chamber guards moved. The Dominion escort moved faster. The tribunal became a battlefield. Elias rolled as another shot burned the glass floor where his head had been. His chains dragged him sideways, still locked to the central anchor. A Thalori clerk screamed. Mirror panels shattered. Security drones dropped from the ceiling, only to be cut apart by Vorn shock blades. Delegates fled towards sealed exits that refused to open because the Hall of Weights had entered emergency containment. Varkun strode through the chaos toward Elias. "You should have stayed silent," he snarled. Elias braced one boot against the anchor column and pulled against the chains. The magnets held. "People keep telling us that." Varkun lifted his weapon. A dying Ambassador Saru reached one shaking arm toward the floor controls and pressed a diplomatic override. Elias's chains unlocked. He did not waste the gift. He lunged forward, not away. That surprised Varkun. It always surprised the powerful when the wounded moved toward them. Elias slammed into the commander's knees, driving both of them down. The shot went wide and blasted a hole through the arbiter's bench. Varkun roared, grabbed Elias by the collar and threw him across the chamber. Elias hit the glass hard enough to crack it. Below him, Veyrath's copper cloud spun in silence. He tried to stand. His ribs refused. His vision blurred. Varkun advanced. Around them, tribunal guards and Dominion escorts fought in flashes of white and red. The High Arbiter stood frozen behind a fractured bench, staring at the archive images still pouring across the walls. For the first time, Voss looked less like law and more like a man discovering his robes were soaked in someone else's blood. Elias pushed himself up on one arm. Varkun stopped above him. "You think truth wins wars?" the commander asked. Elias coughed blood. "No." Varkun aimed at his head. Elias looked him in the eyes. "But it chooses who shows up." The first human ships arrived 30 seconds later. They did not emerge as a grand fleet. Humanity did not have one left in that region. Their nearest military force was 6 jumps away and politically forbidden from entering tribunal space without invitation. So the first ships were ugly. A grain hauler with patched engines, a survey cutter with one missing sensor wing, 3 medical shuttles, a salvage tug named Bad Idea in peeling yellow paint. Then came more: mining rigs, courier skiffs, colony ferries, research vessels, private freighters, old patrol craft declared obsolete before most alien captains were born, ships from Marrow's reach that should have been trapped below the blockade, ships from neighboring settlements that had watched the archive and understood exactly what came next. The Dominion fleet moved to intercept. Then the second wave arrived. Not human, Ilvan water carriers, Keth Accord shield barges, Namar trade vessels, silent black ships from the Uru monasteries, even a tribunal medical frigate that was not legally allowed to take sides until its captain broadcast, "There are wounded in the hall." The archive had not only revealed the past, it had made neutrality impossible. In orbit above Marrow's reach, Commander Rhea Ward watched the sky fill with signatures and allowed herself exactly one breath of relief before the Dominion changed tactics. "They are breaking formation," May said from the archive console. Main bombardment ships turning toward the colony. Rhea's relief vanished. "They are done pretending they want the archive intact." The Dominion had lost the legal battle. That made them more dangerous, not less. Empires built on denial do not surrender when exposed. They burn the documents, the witnesses, the building, and, if possible, the memory of fire. Rhea opened a channel to all colony defenders. "This is Ward. They are going to hit the surface. Every shelter sealed. Every shield emitter to manual. Every drone we have goes up now." Thomas's voice crackled back. "Even the agricultural drones? Especially those. Good. I hated the little ones." Above the colony, hundreds of farm drones launched from fields, barns, repair sheds, and school rooftops. They carried no weapons. They carried seed canisters, soil sensors, irrigation tanks, and reflective weather foil. Under May's remote control, they flew into the upper atmosphere and unfolded into chaotic, glittering clouds. Dominion targeting systems tried to classify them: weather anomaly, agricultural equipment, debris, civilian infrastructure, non-combatant hazard. The bombardment ships hesitated for 3 critical seconds because their own war law algorithms could not decide whether firing through the cloud would create evidence of intentional civilian targeting. Humanity had not defeated the guns. It had made the guns ask permission from their own lies. Rhea used those seconds. "Launch the old elevator counterweights." Across Marrow's reach, the ruined orbital elevator base fired its emergency ballast masses into the sky. The counterweights were never designed as weapons. They were massive blocks of industrial composite meant to stabilize cargo cables. But mass did not care about design intent. The first counterweight struck a Dominion destroyer across its lower hull and sent it spinning into the path of another ship's firing arc. The second shattered under defensive fire, spraying fragments through a squadron of attack craft. The third missed entirely, which was fine, because humans had painted it with every active surrender transponder code May could forge. Dominion interceptors chased it for 12 seconds before realizing they had been lured away from the colony shield grid. Rhea looked at the tactical display. Not enough. Still not enough. The main bombardment vessel, a black wedge 8 kilometers long, aligned with the colony ridge. Its forward weapon opened like an eye. May whispered, "We cannot stop that." Rhea stared at the screen. The archive chamber pulsed behind her, still broadcasting testimony across the stars. Around the pillar, ancient faces appeared and vanished, as if the dead were watching to see whether the living had learned anything. Rhea opened a private channel. "Elias." In the Hall of Weights, Elias heard his sister's voice through a broken tribunal speaker while Varkun's weapon remained aimed at him. The commander paused. That was all Elias needed. He kicked upward into Varkun's injured knee, rolled under the weapon arm, and drove a shard of broken glass into the commander's wrist seam. Varkun bellowed. The gun fell. Elias grabbed it, reversed it clumsily, and fired at the chain anchor still mounted in the floor. The blast shattered the anchor's power core. A containment pulse knocked both men apart. Elias crawled toward the speaker. "Rhea?" Her voice came through static. "They are lining up a planet breaker shot." Elias's blood went cold. "How long?" "Less than 2 minutes." The Hall of Weights continued tearing itself apart around him. But across the mirrors, everyone saw the same thing now. The Dominion bombardment vessel over Marrow's reach, weapon bloom expanding. High Arbiter Voss finally moved. He raised both hands and spoke with the full authority of his office. "Dominion vessel Carvex Crown, stand down. This tribunal has not authorized planetary fire." No response. Voss's voice hardened. "Stand down or you will be declared in violation of—" Varkun laughed from the floor. His wrist bled black around the glass shard. His armor was cracked, yet his smile returned. "The Crown does not answer to paper." Elias looked at him, then at Voss, then at the shattered mirrors broadcasting the weapon charge to half the civilized galaxy. "Arbiter," Elias said, "does this station have mass drivers?" Voss stared. "This is a court." "That was not my question." A Thalori clerk, trembling behind an overturned bench, answered before Voss could. "Debris deflection launchers. Low velocity. Not military grade." Elias dragged himself upright. "Can they target the weapon ship?" "No," the clerk said. "Range is insufficient." "Can they target anything between here and the weapon ship?" The clerk blinked. Voss understood first. The Tribunal Station is in orbital alignment with the Dominion Command Relay. Varkin's smile vanished. Elias looked at the Arbiter. You want to be law again? Choose. For all his elegance, all his compromise, all his careful years balancing power against principle, Cyril Voss found himself standing at the simplest edge in the universe. On one side, procedure. On the other, children under a mountain waiting for fire. He lowered his hands. Clerk, he said, unlock debris launchers. The clerk hesitated only once. Voss turned toward the remaining tribunal guards. All launchers, full discharge. Target the Dominion Command Relay. That will cripple the station's orbital safety systems, someone protested. Voss looked at the mirrors filled with the dead of buried worlds. Then we will finally risk something. The Hall of Weights fired everything it had. From the outside, the Tribunal Station did not look like a weapon. It looked like a jewel cracking open. Maintenance pods, debris shields, construction plates, dead satellite housings, ceremonial counterweights, archived evidence vaults, even sections of decorative outer ring were hurled into space by emergency launch rails never meant for war. Most missed. Some burned apart. One struck the Dominion Command Relay. It did not explode dramatically. It twisted, ruptured, and went dark. For 6 seconds, the bombardment vessel lost fleet synchronization. For 6 seconds, its weapon stood ready but unconfirmed. For 6 seconds, Rhea Ward saw the seam. May, she said. Send the Archive into their targeting core. May looked horrified. That will burn the entire chamber network. Yes, the Archive will be gone. No, Rhea said, looking at the broadcast spreading across thousands of worlds. It already left. May understood. Her fingers flew. The Archive pillar blazed white. Around them, the ancient memories accelerated into a storm. Every preserved testimony, every map, every name, every final message from civilizations erased by the Dominion compressed into one impossible flood and launched itself through the broken command channel into the bombardment vessel's targeting mind. The ship's weapon did not fire. Its systems saw every world the Dominion had burned, every false surrender, every buried child, every cleaned report, every officer who had signed the lies. For a machine trained to confirm targets, the Archive presented one final question. Is this lawful? The weapon locked. The bombardment vessel shuddered as its own safety systems fought command overrides. Dominion officers tried to force the shot manually. The Archive kept feeding testimony into every confirmation path. Rhea watched the power bloom destabilize. Everybody down! The forward weapon collapsed inward. The blast tore through the bombardment vessel's bow and hurled it away from the colony in a silent arc of burning metal. The mountain above the Archive chamber cracked. For a moment, the defenders cheered. Then the ceiling fell. Rhea woke under stone dust and darkness. Her ears rang. Her mouth tasted of iron. Something heavy pinned her left leg. Emergency lights flickered through the collapsed chamber like dying fireflies. May? She called. No answer. Tomas? A cough. Then Tomas's voice, weak but irritated. I am too old for historic moments. Rhea almost laughed and almost passed out. The Archive pillar was broken. The great central structure that had held the memories of murdered civilizations lay split down the middle, its light fading into soft blue sparks. Around it, volunteers crawled from rubble, helping the wounded, calling names, answering when called. May was alive, bleeding from the forehead, clutching her cracked console like a child. The transmission completed, she whispered. It completed. Rhea leaned her head back against stone. Above them, the battle was not over. The Dominion still had ships. The Tribunal Station was damaged. The colony shields were failing. Her brother might be dead in a court full of enemies, but the planet breaker shot had failed. The Archive had spoken, and across the stars, people were moving. The final battle did not belong to admirals. It belonged to everyone who had watched the truth arrive and decided that watching was no longer enough. At Marrow's reach, human freighters rammed Dominion interdiction nets to open lanes for medical ships. Keth shield barges placed themselves between the colony and cruiser fire. Ilvan water carriers vented ocean tanks into space, creating glittering ice clouds that scattered laser arrays. Uru monastery ships drifted silent and black through the chaos, projecting old treaty songs that confused Dominion identification systems because no war fleet had ever bothered to classify prayer as electronic warfare. Aboard the tribunal station, Elias and the surviving guards dragged Ambassador Seyru to a medical pod while Voss broadcast emergency indictments over every open channel. Varkan tried one last time to reach Dominion Command, only to find his authority revoked by officers who had seen the archive and understood he had become evidence. He lunged for Elias anyway. Some men cannot imagine defeat unless their hands are empty. Elias met him halfway. He was smaller, injured, exhausted, and almost certainly concussed. Varkan was bred for war and armored like a siege engine. The fight should have lasted 1 second. It lasted 23 because Elias did not try to overpower him. He yielded, slipped, grabbed broken surfaces, used the low gravity fluctuations from the damaged station, drove Varkan into slick blood on the glass, and refused to stay down. Every time the commander struck him, Elias came back from a different angle. Every time Varkun reached for a weapon, Elias made the distance ugly. Finally, Varkun seized him by the throat and lifted him off the floor. "Why do humans keep fighting after the outcome is clear?" Varkan snarled. Elias's feet kicked uselessly. His hands closed around the commander's wrist. Through the shattered mirrors, behind Varkun's shoulder, Elias saw Marrow's reach, still glowing under its shields. He saw ships from species that had been silent an hour ago now, burning engines in its defense. He saw Rhea's emergency beacon blinking from beneath the mountain rubble. Alive. Barely. Enough. Elias forced air through his crushed throat. "Because you keep being wrong about the outcome." Voss struck Varkan from behind with the ceremonial weight of office. It was a long silver staff, mostly symbolic, carried by high arbiters for 1,000 years to remind the court that judgment was heavy. It had never been used as a weapon in recorded history. It worked beautifully. Varkan dropped Elias and staggered. Tribunal guards hit him with restraint fields from 3 sides. The commander roared, fought, nearly broke through, and finally crashed to the glass floor beneath the reflected faces of the civilizations his empire had tried to erase. Voss stood over him, breathing hard. His white robes were torn. One sleeve was burned. Blood, not all of it his, marked his hands. Elias looked up from the floor. Voss stared at the blood on his own fingers, as if seeing them for the first time. Then the arbiter said quietly, "The court recognizes the evidence." The Dominion broke in stages, not all at once. Empires rarely do. First, captains refused illegal fire orders because their crews had seen the archive. Then border worlds closed refuel stations. Then client states denied passage. Then the Keth Accord seized Dominion assets under emergency reparations law. Then Dominion civilian families, seeing the same evidence as everyone else, began asking what else had been done in their name. By the time the surviving warships attempted retreat from Marrow's reach, their navigation lanes were crowded with vessels from half the sector. Not a conquering army, a refusal. Ships simply stood in the way, one after another, until the Dominion had nowhere to move without becoming the villain in every record forever. For a regime built on plausible deniability, that was a cage stronger than steel. 2 days later, Elias walked through the ruins of the archive chamber on crutches. He had 12 fractures, a damaged throat, and strict medical orders he had ignored within 15 minutes of waking. Rhea met him at the broken pillar, one leg braced, one arm in a sling, face bruised and hair gray with dust that no shower had fully removed. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Rhea said, "You look terrible." Elias nodded. "You look legally dead." "I got better." He tried to laugh, winced, and leaned against a cracked wall. Around them, rescue crews moved carefully through the chamber. Humans and aliens worked side by side, cataloging fragments, recovering bodies, stabilizing the mountain. The archive's great light was gone, but smaller veins still glowed faintly in the stone, like embers protected under ash. May Hollis sat nearby with a portable console, eyes red from exhaustion. "Most of the original lattice burned out," she said, "but copies exist now. Not complete, but enough. Thousands of receivers captured fragments. The tribunal has full legal testimony. The Ilven got the star maps. The Keth got casualty ledgers. Someone in the Uru fleet caught the final messages. Elias looked at the broken pillar. And the names? May's face softened. All of them. Rhea closed her eyes. For the first time since the siege began, she let herself feel the weight of what had been saved. Not the colony, not the legal victory, not even the battle. The names. Millions, maybe billions, pulled from deliberate silence and returned to the universe. High Arbiter Voss arrived an hour later without an escort. No robes, no ceremonial staff, just a plain gray recovery suit and a face that seemed older by decades. The human volunteers stopped working when he entered, not out of respect, out of uncertainty. Voss approached Rhea and Elias carefully, as one might approach survivors after causing the storm. "I came to offer formal apology," he said. Rhea looked at him. "Formal apology is a small container." "Yes," Voss said, "it is." Elias studied him. "What happens now?" "The tribunal has suspended all Dominion claims pending full investigation. Emergency protections have been extended to Marrow's Reach and every settlement within the disputed region. Commander Varkin will stand trial. So will those who falsified evidence." Rhea's expression did not change. "And you?" Voss looked toward the broken archive. "I have submitted my resignation." "That is not trial." "No," he said. "It is not enough." Silence settled between them. Then Thomas Cade, sitting on a supply crate with one arm bandaged and absolutely no diplomatic training, said, "Then do something useful." Everyone looked at him. Tomas shrugged. "If guilt fixed pipes, I would have retired rich." Voss absorbed that with unexpected seriousness. "What would you have me do?" Rhea pointed to the archive fragments. "Help protect the copies. No single empire, court, species, or alliance gets to control them. The dead trusted a planet because institutions failed. We are not making that mistake again." Voss bowed his head. "For whatever my promise is worth, you have it." Elias watched him leave. Then he looked at Rhea. "Do we trust him?" "No." "Do we use him?" "Absolutely." 3 months later, Marrow's Reach held a memorial under an unfinished sky. The colony ridge was still scarred black where Dominion fire had struck. Half the greenhouses were gone. The orbital elevator base was a twisted skeleton on the horizon. The Archive Mountain had been sealed, not as a military site, not as a museum, but as a protected grave under shared guardianship. People came from worlds that had never cared about humans before. Ilven singers floated in transparent water spheres, carrying laments for oceans they had never seen. Keth shield bearers stood shoulder to shoulder with human farmers. Uru monks carved the names of the lost into thin black tablets that reflected starlight. Tribunal clerks recorded testimony from survivors who had once believed no one would listen. Elias stood beside Rhea at the edge of the crowd. His voice had not fully healed, so he spoke little. That suited him. Rhea did not like ceremonies. That also suited him. May Hollis stepped onto a simple platform built from salvaged Dominion armor plates and colony timber. She looked terrified to be watched by so many worlds, but she held up a small crystal shard from the archive lattice. "This is not the archive," she said. "The archive was larger than us, older than us, braver than us. It carried memory across extinction because someone, at the end of everything, believed the future deserved evidence." The crowd remained silent. May's voice steadied. "We cannot bring them back. We cannot undo the worlds burned or the names buried. But we can refuse the second death. We can refuse forgetting." She placed the shard into a beacon cradle. Across the ridge, children from Marrow's Reach came forward, carrying small lights. Human children, Keth children, Ilven young in rolling water harnesses, even 2 Thalori children from the tribunal delegation, solemn and wide-eyed. One by one, they touched their lights to the beacon. When the final child stepped back, the beacon activated, not loudly, not violently. A thin column of blue-white light rose from the ridge and pierced the evening sky. Above the planet, thousands of ships answered, not with weapons, with running lights. Every color, every shape, every engine signature gathered around the world that had almost been erased for telling the truth. Rhea leaned closer to Elias. "You know they will tell this wrong." He glanced at her. She nodded toward the crowds, the cameras, the diplomats already shaping history into something clean. "They will say humans saved the Archive because we are noble, or stubborn, or uniquely brave." Elias watched Thomas arguing with a Keth engineer about water pressure near a memorial pump. "We are stubborn." "Yes," Rhea said, "but that is not why." Elias looked toward the sealed mountain. He thought of the tribunal timer stopping at 1 second, of Ambassador Saru stepping into the line of fire, of Voss choosing, too late but not never, of May sending a surrender code that carried accusation, of Rhea holding a colony together under the sky's loaded gun. "No," he said, "we saved it because someone tried to make silence the price of survival." Years later, historians would name the siege of Marrow's Reach as the first fracture of the Dominion era. They would study the tribunal breach, the archive transmission, the civilian fleet convergence, the weapon lock paradox, and the legal collapse that followed. Military academies would analyze how farming drones delayed bombardment. Political scholars would argue over whether High Arbiter Voss redeemed the court or merely exposed its weakness. Children would learn that the dead beneath Marrow's Reach were not myths, not numbers, not extinct entries in forgotten catalogs, but people who had loved, feared, fled, hoped, and left warnings for strangers they would never meet. The Dominion would spend generations denying what everyone had seen, then negotiating what it could not deny, then paying for what negotiation could not erase. But on Marrow's Reach, the story remained simpler. An empire came for a secret. A court prepared to bless a massacre. A prisoner asked for more time. A colony disguised truth as surrender. And when the galaxy finally saw what had been buried, humans did what humans had always done at the edge of impossible choices. They found the seam. They held it open with broken hands, and through it, the dead spoke, the living answered, and the universe learned that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never its ships, its guns, or its rage. It was the refusal to let anyone disappear quietly.